All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Manganaro. I'm the professor of military science here at Furman. And before we get started, just to just lay out some structure of what this is. So we've got a good mixture. My numbers keep continuing to go up. We're about 258 people now online and growing. I already got my first question coming in the Q&A box, which was good. Hey, is this a CLP event for Furman students? The answer to that question is yes. So this is one of those cultural life program events that you have that you can get credit for. So we have our CLP monitors on from Furman University. They're on now to take attendance, and we'll gather the attendance at the end of this to stay throughout the entire webinar. We'll be done within the hour, so that'll be good to get done. And then also for any questions, we'll go through that coming up here in a second. So again, welcome to our webinar, Where's the Enemy? Military Intelligence in the Modern World. Unique here because of the audience we have and the folks that things we're going to be talking about. So again, just some guidelines up front we want to discuss, again, because of the audience we have, students, cadets, alumni, faculty, friends, parents. We have a very, very diverse group of folks online here, both military and non-military. So in the military terms, for those that, this is an unclassified webinar. We're in the open discussing on Zoom here, military intelligence and those kinds of topics, but it is unclassified. We are currently being recorded. So this CLP is a recorded CLP, and this everybody, the participants that are on here are all tracking that it's recorded on that. If you do have questions on the webinar, there should be a Q&A box. You click that Q&A box, you type your question in there. We do have a time at the end to take your questions. We'll try our best to accommodate as many as we can, and then answer it as we can. Again, going through the standard protocol for CLPs. This is a Furman University CLP program presented by the Furman Military Alumni Association. And we do enjoy the fact that there's such a diverse set of people online, but let's just be aware of, a second and last sentence on there, that we all display respect for those that are presenting and for the views that we're having and the things that we're going to talk about. Some you may not know a single thing about. Some you may say, I know more than that general. I challenge you, that's probably not going to happen. But if you do, you just, this is a candid conversation, things we're having, things that I'll be moderating that conversation. But if you do have a question, you want to pick a brain on something, please do ask. We'll do that in a respectful way and in a mindful way. The presenters will be the same way back to you. Okay, again, like I said, I'm Chris Manganaro. I'm the Furman ROTC military professor of military science. I've been here for about 2 years. Not at Furman. I'm the only person on this webinar not a Furman grad. So, I'm jealous though. I'm very jealous. I did not go to school here. I went to school up in New York called Hofstra University. I got my master's from Georgetown University, but I'm a paladin. I'm a paladin for life. Once you come here, you're a paladin. And so extremely honored and blessed to be where I'm currently at right now at the Furman ROTC building we have been provided by our alumni. We have our own building right next to the PAC, the Physical Athletic Center, for those that know where we are. And those on campus, students on campus, you see us sometimes wearing, that's where we're this day, you see us wearing our fatigues. Sometimes you see us in our workout gear. Sometimes you just see us walking to class. So I'm a logistics officer by trade, but by sure I've worked with intelligence folks that have helped me definitely get through my job and handle what I'm due. We've got 2 current participants on. The third one's trying to get on and connect right now. But the first there, Major General retired Chris Ballard. Currently where he is sitting in that office there, you can see on there, he is 2.1 miles from my office, which is a blessing to have a retired 2-star general. General Ballard has been around, and as when we add up all of our service, we're close to almost 90 years of military intelligence experience that's online here with us today. And General Ballard retired, actually had a ceremony here at Furman University 2 years ago on the Daniel recital hall on that stage. And he'll tell you a little bit about his story here shortly, but that's really unique how that all came full circle. And him and his wife, Michelle, both Furman grads, loved it so much that they retired 2.1 miles from my office, which is great. The next one down there, man, is Major General Charles Cleveland, currently active duty full-time. He's currently serving in Washington, D.C. A lot of letters. I'll have, General Cleveland will cover all these letters and agencies that he's working for, but in a nutshell, he's in D.C. working for a very, very high level intelligence job and community, and his role there is 100% online with what we're talking about today from there. And the last gentleman, hopefully he can get on right now, is Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Adams, a recent grad, recent in the sense that I feel recent because that's the same year I graduated, class of 2003. He is, for those that maybe know about the military, maybe you don't know about the military, but you maybe have heard of the Maroon Berets at the 82nd Airborne Division, which is, as we say, the All-American Division, or referred to in the Army as the division. And he's currently up there as the G2, or the highest ranking intelligence officer in the 82nd Airborne. So really proud of him and what he's doing up there, and hopefully he can jump on here in a second. So that's our group up here.
Hey, Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'm in.
Yeah, guys, that voice is live from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Nathan Adams, great. Thanks, Nathan, for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry, I can't operate technology.
It's okay. It's
okay.
okay.
Out of airplane, though.
There's a question that I can ask you later on the webinar that will relate exactly what just occurred. So thank you. One thing you guys can know, and all of you know about the military, we're resilient. We'll figure a way to get this done one way, shape, or form, and that's what this group here is going to do. So excellent. Well, really just an icebreaker to start off. The way the format's going to work, we'll have a little bit of an introduction right now, brief, kind of give you more substance about who we are, the people beyond just, and then what do those letters mean? There's a lot of acronyms because that's the Army. And then we're going to go into about a 20-minute Q&A between myself and the panelists, and then I'll take your questions at the end. So if you do have them, I see 2 have popped in so far. Just please put it in there, and we'll do our best to answer at the end. So we'll kind of go in order. So with General Ballard, you've told me this many times. I love this story. I can't wait for everyone to hear it because it's odd how it happens. But sir, tell us a little bit more about your background, but more importantly, kind of tell us what was your favorite thing about Furman? Why did you love Furman? And I'll turn it over to you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Okay, Chris, thanks. Yeah, listen, I had a great experience at Furman, and as you recall, I was commissioned in the summer of '84 on the stage at Daniel Recital Hall because we weren't big enough to be worthy of McAllister Auditorium. I think there were 8 of us that were commissioned that day. But yeah, 35 years later, I got to kind of do a retirement ceremony on the same stage, and my dad was there, the guy who had sworn me in 35 years before, and it was kind of coming full circle, and it was great. My wife and I met in the Furman Singers. So you don't normally associate that with ROTC, I guess, but in those days, in the early 80s, the men's dorms were on one side of campus and the women's dorms were on the other. And on my freshman hall, we came to the brilliant conclusion that the most attractive ladies on campus were in the Furman Singers. So my freshman hall, we just went en masse to go try out. We thought we could be walk-ons into the Furman Singers. And Dr. Bing Vic, the conductor at the time, must have thought we were absolutely loony for doing it, for wasting his time. But somehow or another, I got in, and it worked. And I married up, and so yeah, Michelle and I spent time in the Furman Singers, and she's been singing ever since. So that's my success story out of Furman, was figuring out where I needed to be to come out successful on the other side.
No, thanks, sir, so much. And yes, I also married up. I married my college sweetheart as well, Claire. She's amazing. She's working right now, but I love her. And you're right. It's that teamwork, that teammates. If you ever see them out, you'll see them on campus. Students, you'll see General Ballard and his wife, Michelle. You'll see them. They're big basketball fans. They're huge football fans. They're fans of all Paladin sports, and you will see them. So if you do, say, hey, General, I saw you on that webinar. So please say hi to them. You'll see them out there on campus. So thanks. So General Cleveland, over to you, a little bit more about background, and more importantly, kind of what about Furman did you love about it and why?
Yeah, Chris, thanks. And again, my sincere thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I think hands down, without a doubt, my favorite memory of Furman was the CLP program. And I think back on all the time that I spent trying to expand my mind and sitting in McAllister. That, of course, accelerated as a senior, where I spent an awful lot more time sitting in McAllister. And I'm sure none of the students today run into the same challenges that I did. But no, actually, my as quick background, I'm an Army brat. Went to high school, in fact, in Berlin, Germany. And so as you can imagine, in the mid 80s, it was difficult to choose and view and understand what was happening in colleges from Central Europe. And so the first time I came to Furman was the day I drove through the gates with all my stuff and got set up and just had a wonderful time. And for me, I don't have one event, perhaps. It's really this series of kind of still photos in my mind, because ultimately I am still kind of a bit of a digital immigrant. I still think very much in an analog way. But for me, I have these snapshots in time of playing mud football out on the soccer field that has now become just a wonderful facility. The Friday nights before homecoming, walking up and down the mall, really just kind of moving off campus and getting your first apartment and being able to be, a bit more self-sufficient and then foreign study as well, the opportunity to do that. But I think the thread that brings all of those together for me is really the people. And so as I think about those particular events, what made them special were the people that I was there with. So, yeah.
All right, thanks, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And finally, Colonel Adams, again to you, pose the question, a little bit more about your background, anything unique we need to know, and then again from more recent, 2003, recent in you and I's view. But what are some memories? What's the most things you can think about when you think about Furman?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Augusta, Georgia. So right down the road. I did not want to go in-state to Georgia, and so I had to find a way to get out of state. I wanted to be far enough away from home that I was away, but could still get back if I needed to. And so Furman was a great match. Actually, my grandmother graduated from Furman when it was the Greenville Women's College in the 1940s, and so it was a family decision as well to come to Furman and be in the ROTC program. As far as favorite memory, I guess my favorite memory, I should say, is like being with Leo Fackler on the O staff for 3 years in a row. But I have a number of wonderful memories from my time at Furman. The one that I'll share, I'll choose one from February. So February 2001, I had the privilege of getting invited to Kappa Delta Crush. We went to City Range for dinner, went out to the Cliffs Valley Clubhouse, and my date with someone that I had been friends with, but I would tell you that I got smitten there, and my wife Jamie has been with me on our Army journey together since 2003 when we get married. So that's a February memory from Furman that is one that has carried through my whole life here, kind of in the Army. So.
Thanks very much. And for those that are on the screen, there is a Leo Fackler. He's our director of alumni up here and a great supporter of the Army ROTC program and the Furman Military Alumni Association. In small world, when we had set up this webinar, we had said, we had reached out to some military intelligence alumni, and that's a small connection there. As well as I've heard, for those that have been here, and this seems to be a number happening, and there's more out there. So students, be aware. It's called the Bell Tower Bliss, and that is the Bell Tower can cause a lot of love to happen here at Furman, and some great Furman students that continue on. So, and we have a lot of the Ballards and Adams, and to keep going. So good. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I think there was a little bit, we had to set that context, because yes, we can go through your files and look at that, but there's a personal side to all of this. We have a personal side we have, and that's what we can do with that. But I like to just now kind of pivot us and go to the meat of what we want to talk about and folks want to hear about. And so really first, a couple of questions here. We're going to go back and forth through them and have a discussion. And General Cleveland, sir, for you, I just want to kind of ask you the first one. And that is, we've dealt with, at least for me and for my memory and my first experience coming in, as well as Colonel Adams, I graduated my college, everyone, and 6 months later, I was in a mountain in Afghanistan. That was my experience in college. I graduated and went to Afghanistan, or you went to Iraq. So we dealt with ISIS, Taliban, non-state actors, these what I grew up with, not great power competition. But as we're shifting to state actors, which is what we're going to, how does the intelligence community keep up with or evolve to focus more on kind of great power competition?
Yeah, Chris, thanks. And so, the question you're asking is really the $1 million question right now for not only the U.S. intelligence community, but frankly, the broader government. And in some ways, in fact, just for larger context for everybody, I'm sure many understand the term great power competition very well, but just as kind of a starting point for everybody is, fundamentally the topic of great power competition is really the U.S. government's transition and recognition that we are back into a significant competition with near peer competitors. So competitors out there on the international landscape that do have not only the military capabilities that we do, but the economic capabilities and the information capabilities. And there really is a recognition that, after the last 20 years of focusing on terrorism and countering that terrorism and non-state actors, that clearly we have got some work to do to be able to catch ourselves back up to compete effectively in this era of great power competition. In some ways, it's almost a little bit of Back to the Future, as some may recall. During the Cold War, of course, the U.S. military was focused almost exclusively in some instances on the Soviet Union. And so there was very much a current operations piece, understanding what the Soviets were doing in this location or that location. But there was also an aspect referred to as foundational military intelligence. And that is just the baseline understanding of what the capabilities of the Soviet Union were and were developing. And so in some ways, it's as basic as saying this particular tank moves this quickly, it fires this kind of round, that round goes this far. That tank, when it's operates within a broader formation, and it typically turns left in this scenario or right in this scenario. And so understanding that at all levels of the Soviet military was really one of the key aspects of what the American military intelligence was focused on. Of course, in the 90s, when the Soviet Union dissolved, we as a nation really didn't have much of a peer competitor. And so some of those skills and efforts atrophied on the part of the intelligence community. And then, of course, after 9/11, really our nation spent almost the last 20 years very much focused on these non-state actors. And again, a skill set very different from this great power competition. So as we look to try and transition, what we realize is we do have an awful lot of work from not only a military intelligence standpoint, but from a broader intelligence community standpoint to go back to better understanding those competitors, specifically the Chinese and the Russians, understanding their capabilities, understanding their doctrine, understanding the intent and the direction that they intend to go. But in the last 25, 30 years since this has all progressed, what I think we've all realized as well is that great powers project their power not only through the military, but they project it through their economic power, and they certainly project it through their information capabilities. And so I think what we're collectively finding is that we've got to not only understand their military capabilities, but we've also got to just as equally understand the impact of their economic power and their ability to communicate and to dominate in the information, the broader information environment. So Chris, I'll pause there and open it up for either General Ballard or Nate to touch on as well.
Yeah, I'd like to, because you raised quite a few interesting things, General Cleveland, I think would be worth talking about. I graduated in '84, and my first duty assignment was in Europe in the late '80s, and was actually there when the Iron Curtain fell in November of 1989. And at the time, the way we trained and the way we prepared for what we thought would be a potential war with the Soviets in Europe was to do an awful lot of map reconnaissance. We had made map books for every tank in our outfit. We used flashcards to identify the uniforms of the Warsaw Pact soldiers and to be able to try to understand the profiles of aircraft as they might fly over and that type of the equipment of the Soviet Union. As we think now about great power competition, and you look at images in the Ukraine, for example, you're not going to necessarily see uniformed conventional forces. There are aspects of great power competition today which are very different than the way they were in the Cold War, and that's why I think you're going to find in our military there's an increasing call for multi-domain capabilities, that we're not just looking at air, land, and sea anymore. Cyberspace and space itself are now domains in which we're really going to have to come to terms with these new competitors out there, and they are certainly taking advantage of those domains and are operating in those seams to make it very difficult for us. I think General Cleveland's absolutely right in that the foundational part of intelligence doesn't change. It's collection, it's exploitation, it's analysis, it's dissemination, and we continue that cycle to be able to provide meaningful information, intelligence for decision makers. And that's not going to change, but the way we do it is changing dramatically, I think. And we're not going to necessarily be able to rely on exquisite sensors to have a monopoly on information about our adversaries as we might have been able to do in the Cold War. One of the greatest challenges of today's digitized information is that an awful lot of it's in the public domain. And our adversaries have as much access to it. Our competitors have as much access to it in some cases as we do. And so the question is, who can turn that information, that data, into relevant, timely, accurate intelligence for decision makers faster than the adversary? And so there's a race, I think, about the intelligence work that we're facing today that it is pretty challenging, and our adversaries and our competitors don't make it easy on us in many respects.
Yes, sir. I want to peel that Band-Aid off, because I think it's something that I've thought about. I think most people thought about just in the last 5 or 10 years as we've gone away. I mean, the days of you, like you just said, sir, you could probably know the who, what, when, where, why. You knew kind of a deck of cards. You pulled out your deck of cards and you knew it. And the internet, for what it's worth, and this media connection is amazing. But I think each and every day, our world becomes more connected. Zoom, the platform we're on right now, I did not know what Zoom was up till March of 2020. So in a world where it's so clogged, I would say clogged, I'm thinking of a pipe. A pipe only has so much that can go through that pipe. And 20 years ago, the pipe was pretty open. And if there was a piece of intelligence that went through, I saw, so, sir, with your work at the National Security Agency, the NSA, that pipe was very big, and we can catch that bad thing coming through there. I would say maybe easier, I argue, maybe there's a ability to be there. But now, how do we collect intelligence in a connected world where you just said, and I agree with you, sir, we want you to be putting stuff out in the open because it makes it easier for folks like Colonel Adams, who's at the 82nd right now. He's trying to provide his commander a good assessment. And so the easier it's out there, I can get it. But you brought up the ungoverned space. So can you just expand a little bit more, sir, on, what are some challenges with the, not internet, but with open source information, the media, the social media, Instagram of our adversaries, that is both positive for intelligence and also in a negative way? So over to you, John.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I mean, I think one of the foundational pieces that General Cleveland was getting at is that we will always seek multidisciplined, all source analysis. The way we reduce the risk of being duped is that we look at a threat from multiple different intelligence vectors, so that we can't necessarily be fooled by one or the other. And so seeking multidisciplined intelligence, multidisciplined collection capabilities is still very, very valid. But they're also very, very expensive. The common joke you hear is, if you want to know what Vladimir Putin is doing today, ask his refrigerator. Because all of these appliances, everything is now being connected in ways that, do we necessarily want to spend and General Cleveland's I'm sure going to pile on this, but do we spend money on $1 million satellite systems that are at risk to be attacked, if we can get into CCTV cameras throughout an adversary's area in which we can still get a picture of what's going on the ground in a way that it's novel in a different way? So, I mean, the way we're going to approach this, I think, as an intelligence community is going to be a lot more complex and take advantage of some of those opportunities that are there. And I think there are going to be a lot of opportunities there. The challenge now isn't necessarily about collection. The challenge now is, how do you exploit it in a way fast enough to provide that relevant intelligence to decision makers? General Ashley, Bob Ashley, used to be the G2 of the Army and former DIA director, said we've got to be able to produce intelligence at the speed of decision making. And that there's a speed component there that I think is very challenging and is going to be increasingly challenging as we go forward. Is that when you've got terabytes of data, information, turning that into something that's relevant to a decision maker, so that that person, whether it's a commander or a policymaker, so that they can be decisive, you've got to be able to cull through that pretty fast. And so I think what we're finding today is there's an awful lot of investment in artificial intelligence. Not that they're going to replace analysts, but they're going to help triage information so that what our analysts actually use, what they get their hands on, what they cull through, is going to be valuable to decision makers, and not spend hours and hours culling through data that doesn't make any sense. So AI is going to be a big part of that, I think.
Yeah, sir, if I can kind of follow on what you're talking about, those are all things that we are kind of dealing with on a daily basis here. at the 82nd. One of these issues is so data aggregation, and then the other piece is correlating a report or correlating a piece of information to something else. So whether it is, today you're taking somebody's Instagram photo or their, tweet, that is, one single piece of information, but it's, can you build a profile either of who that individual is, or build a profile of what that unit is, potentially using other intelligence sources. And so some of that comes from the support that General Cleveland provides the Army and the NGA provides the Army, or whether that's support that the NSA provides the Army. But that pulling it all together is one thing that is necessary, but it is also, how do we make all those puzzle pieces match, or how do we get all those intelligence disciplines to tell us a single story, and then to get it to a decision maker, and then also kind of unique to the job that we do here in the 82nd, how do we do it in a very austere environment, when we are just jumping out of an airplane, landing on the ground, and the only thing that we have available to us are the the rucksacks that we jump in with. And so doing that, computing either at scale on the ground with us, or being able to have the communications technology to reach back and have that information fed to us from some larger, either stateside or at a base somewhere, to feed that to us. Those are also kind of problems of intelligence, is how do we do it and get it all the way down to the ground, to the user.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more on how that all weaves together, and how it's, as if you're a casual watcher, if you're a political science, or if you're a bio major at Furman, you're saying, how do you do this every day? How is this part of what we do? And that, are there people actually working on this? And the answer to that question is yes. There are literally people work on this every single day, and they're trying to answer these problems. They're trying to develop these solutions to that. I want to take what we just talked. So we've talked about great power. We talked about our competitors, legitimate competitors out there, and that's what they are. They're our competitors. We're not full-blown. We are not at war with countries that we've named today. We are a competitor of them. Near peers, what we call them. We've talked about digital world, how that's going to be difficult, and the pipe that used to be very big and we can put some stuff through is now getting tighter and tighter and tighter by the moment. And the bandwidth is getting tighter and tighter with everybody. School kids online, Furman students online, all of us are online. The 298 people that are currently on this we're making noise right now somewhere in some satellite system. But I want to shift gears and talk about some real life examples of, we can talk about the past, we can talk about, 20 years ago, but, there was things that occurred recently that we can say, okay, is this how it's going to be? Is this how it's going to be in the future? So, I want to turn it to Colonel Adams, tactically out there, 82nd Airborne Division, in the fight, as we say it, and planning for it. But, Nate, I just want to talk about, the changing conflict and how we can just predict and we can make the best assessments. But, how does the future battlefield look like? Are there any examples of conflicts that you can pull from that you can help us maybe not understand, because we're maybe here in Greenville, or you're somewhere in the United States you weren't tracking? And how important are drones? I think you saw the picture up there, the person throwing the drone. How are drones and unmanned vehicles, which are used, somebody's controlling them, but how does that impact intelligence from your standpoint? So over to you, Colonel Adams. Yeah,
thanks. So a couple of things to touch on. One, the rise of drones is as ubiquitous as probably your living room on Christmas morning. So this is a picture here is an example of what's called a Raven that infantry soldiers can carry with them. They can throw, and then when the thing comes down, it crashes and it just breaks into pieces. And so, and we are using kind of even smaller drones at the squad and platoon. So you're thinking squad is probably 9 people and platoon is about 36 people, but we're even using that at lower echelons to give us eyes forward in the battlefield. And that's, really what drones are about today are, how do we put eyes on something and reduce the risk to, the force that's there. From a recent example, if you were following the news, back in October and November, the countries of Azerbaijan and Armenia went to war over a small piece of contested territory. They had fought about it in the 1990s. They had fought about it again in the kind of early 2000s. But as drones have proliferated, and as drone technology has proliferated, and and even kind of as circuitry has gotten smaller, as 3D printing has increased, you have countries that are not necessarily able to afford an air force on the same way as the United States is, or maybe a more developed nation can invest hundreds of millions and billions of dollars on aircraft, but they can spend in the millions of dollars on drone technology. And so over the course of really about a decade, Azerbaijan invested in drone technology through Turkey developing a drone industry, and through other countries developing their own drone industries. They bought into that. And as they got those systems fielded to them, then they took them for a test ride. And that is essentially kind of what happened here in November. They began to use their fleet. But what they did is both kind of, I would say, old world, but old school conventional fight, and then also kind of modern day information warfare fight. So they took their drones, used it, spotted Armenian positions, and really rained down destruction on them through artillery and rockets, and were effective in the course of less than a month. And they gained back all of the territory that they had lost in the 1990s, and then some. And so at the same time as they're kind of spotting, using drones, raining down destruction, very bloody and kind of catastrophic conflict for the Armenian military, which had not had the same modernization, was still fighting very static, dug-in battle positions. Azerbaijan just decimated them. And then at the same time, in the information space, they took these videos of them destroying the Armenian vehicles and military equipment and posted them on their official government YouTube page, and put them out there in the media sphere. And so you have this combination of terrible conflict that really is time immemorial, but that now can get distributed around the world and can get distributed to the population of an adversary country, and you can intimidate that population or say, look how bad things are, and use that. And so here with our commanding general, we talk about fighting in the physical, the virtual, and the cognitive domains. And I think those are really kind of the things that we have to think about as we go and consider what does the battlefield of the 21st century look like. Yes, there will be physical conflict, but also there's virtual conflict, attacking people's web servers or attacking people's internet infrastructure or things like that. But there's also the cognitive side of things, of where we intimidate or send messages or manipulate information in order to get our point across. But I'll pause there either for questions or for other comments.
Hey, Nate, I'll just add on just a little bit. And of course, we're already in what Nate is describing in multiple locations. And, obviously the reason we have an American military, and certainly what the taxpayers expect, is for the American military to be prepared for the absolute worst case, to be prepared for a very kinetic engagement, again, with our peer adversaries. But, and I'm not flippant about this, everything we do is to try and prevent the situation to getting to that point. That is obviously the absolute last thing that any of us wants to see. And so this competition in the domains that Nate was describing is exactly where we are right now. And there is certainly happening all over the globe, competition with some of our near peer competitors. And so whether it's in the South China Sea, whether it is certainly in the Middle East with the various discussions ongoing that we all see in the press, whether it's in the North Atlantic or in Central Europe, these types of activities are continuing along in the information era and in the cyber and all of these types of places. And so in many ways, we are already in this phase of competition that does become more and more important for the military intelligence professional to be able to understand what that environment is and how we can best inform our decision makers so that they can respond accordingly.
I'd like to pile on as well, because I think this is a pretty important point for everybody to understand is you hear sometimes people who are growing weary of unending wars. But the reality is that as we look at this near peer competition and the future that Nate and General Cleveland are describing, we're going to be in constant competition. And even General Nakasone, the director of the NSA and the commander of Cyber Command, has said, we are in a period of aggression short of armed conflict. Whether it's the Sony Pictures hack that we nominally attribute to the North Koreans, whether it's solar winds that just recently occurred that you've heard in the open press, we pretty much attribute that to Russian state actors, or to many others out there. There is a constant struggle going on right now that is, in many respects, a competition or aggression short of armed conflict. And if we start looking at some of our near-peer competitors and the doctrine that is emerging out of whether it's Russian hybrid warfare or Chinese regional influence, they talk about ways in which to achieve short-term national interests without necessarily, or doing it so fast that the opposer can't bring his military might to bear fast enough. And so we're seeing a different type of warfare being played out in some areas where the intelligence work now changes dramatically as to how do we attribute that to the right actors when we see it, because in many cases it's anonymous or it's proxies. And then if we can attribute it, then how do we prepare? How do we see it proactively? How do we see it ahead of time so that we can work preventative measures rather than trying to react in a way that can escalate into armed conflict?
Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much for sharing that. And the Armenian Azerbaijan, that does go back a while back in a part of the world that you can say, that's not going to affect me. That could affect us. Just look at the tactics that are those tactics could be used on me and Nate and General Cleveland. Those tactics are used with using my son got a drone. My 13-year-old son Kim got a drone. I gave him one for his Christmas. So I am now an ISR platform, watch out neighborhood. I can watch everything that's going on in my neighborhood now. But the point being is that it doesn't take large amounts of capital. It does not take large amounts of time for me to know that I can go see what's happening over there. And if you shoot it down, I'm fine. It was $90. I'll be okay. So I think there's a great sense in there, but something that does not cost $90. And I want to take one last of my questions. And then thank you so much. We've got 19 questions in the Q&A. I won't be able to get to all of them, but please put them in there. We'll archive them. But that's a great interaction there. Thank you so much for doing all that. But what does not cost $90 are satellites. Last time I checked. For General Cleveland, one of your letters of many things you've worked on is the NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. So in that role, and I know I have used the NGA today. I went from one location to another. I used my Waze app and it told me where to go, what to do. I used the satellite, sir, that you defend. So thank you for doing that, because traffic in Greenville can get funky at times. But explain to us as casual military, non-military, where do we think that those very expensive satellites that are providing us all of this information, to include, some of our all of our GPS, but where do you see that? Where do you see that going from now? And second question is two-part. One, where do we see the space domain going? And number two, space junk. A couple of our students, one of my cadets here, did some research with this professor, and I believe he's on right now, into the space junk problem, like how much junk is in space, and then these gazillion-dollar satellites crashing into them. It's a concern. So That's what we know here at Furman, sir. So please give us the veil, give us a little bit behind the curtains of, is that true? Is there a lot of space junk we have to be worried about? And then we'll go to the Q&A with the audience. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Chris, and I'll step through this quickly just so we can get to the Q&A and respond to some of the questions. But for everybody, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, really, we are both an intelligence agency as well as what's referred to as a combat support agency. So we're responsible for providing direct support to the American military and to people like Nate who are out and deploying. And we also have responsibilities to provide analysis and information up through the Director of National Intelligence into the National Security Council to help advise policymakers. And in shorthand, really, we are the folks who provide imagery analysis as well as what's referred to as geospatial information. And that's everything from just your basic maps and charts all the way up to supporting the GPS constellation and the things that Chris was describing. So in terms of the future of it, as many know, obviously, the U.S. has gained a tremendous amount of intelligence from space for decades and decades. The first quote unquote spy satellites really went up in the 60s and have been active ever since. But what really is phenomenal right now is we think over the last few years and certainly looking into the future, we are in a bit of a revolution right now as it pertains to these geospatial capabilities. The U.S. national constellation continues to grow and continues to provide some tremendous capabilities. More and more, our allies provide a lot of information to us as they create and launch their own constellations, and as we work very, very closely with a number of allies. But then I think what you're alluding to mostly, Chris, is this explosion of commercial capability. And we think that we are within a couple of years of having every foot on the earth imaged every 24 hours, that some capability will be up in space being able to observe all that. And so being able to leverage all of that information and pick out the key points, and as we discussed earlier, get that information into some digestible form and into the right hands really is our challenge for the future. But a couple of other aspects to it. For decades, the U.S. really cornered the market. Our competitors, our adversaries, frankly, didn't have any capability in any way similar to that. That is no longer the case. And again, General Ballard touched on it as well. Right now, some of our competitors have very similar capabilities, and so they can do to us what we do to them. They can watch us and observe us. And of course, the great equalizer is the commercial market, where, again, almost anybody can go out and purchase this observation and these images of what we are doing. The final piece, Chris, I think that's really different moving into the future is as the joint military forces and the services really come up with their future ways of war, there are still differences and those are being worked. But what's common to all of them is that they all envision what's referred to as over the horizon targeting. So in past years, you could use a predator to perhaps be able to see longer and then be able to fire and target longer. But in the future, what we really envision is being able to use some of these space-based assets to look not tens of kilometers or 30 kilometers, but frankly, hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers by leveraging our space constellation to be able to provide information into our teammates. And so fundamentally, there's a huge future in it. As for space junk, it is absolutely a concern and it is absolutely an issue. And I would tell you that not only the Department of Defense, but the broader U.S. government does actually take it very seriously. And over the last decade, there are a couple of different organizations that have been stood up to really monitor those activities and help navigate those issues. There are some that are U.S. only, but then there are some that are populated with our allied partners as well, so that you have much more information coming in and the ability to address it. And moving forward, I think what we'll likely see is a lot of these capabilities moving from what's referred to as low Earth orbit, really not too far up in space, to these higher orbits, and you'll see capabilities that support that, so that you do have more of an expansive opportunity to use some of that. So Chris, I'll pause there, but I know you're anxious to get to some questions as well.
No, sir, you helped me out of everything we did. We answered the space junk question, and I really wanted to hear that because I was given a graphic. Of course, we communicate via text and message. So I went into like internal chat here. I was like, wow, it was like a bunch of dots all over this globe. And like, sir, there's all this space junk. I was like, oh, that's a lot. That's called cleanup. But yes, thank you so much for sharing that, sir. And in your role with the eyes, for those out there, I mean, to have you at that position literally right now, sharing that with us, You can't get that. You cannot Google that. What he just said, General Cleveland said you cannot Google, and if you could, you don't have the source, and there's the source there. So I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, so we've got about 5 minutes or so. Again, keep putting them in there. Keep putting the questions. We answered some questions as we were talking, which was great. And I appreciate people going back in and say, oh, you answered that question. But I'm just going to skim through a few of them and bring them up here. And we can discuss that too. So the first question is from Mark Dorset. So Mark, thanks for sending this out. And this, I'll just open up to the panel here. So, how vulnerable are we when we use social media, Google Home, Alexa, iPhones? Don't scare us. Everybody on here has one of these phones on them right now. But where do we think, honestly, gentlemen, where do we think the common person is vulnerable in that, if we are, and does that help us when it comes to, like you said, I think General Ballard said, the president of Russia's refrigerator, if it's a Samsung smart fridge, then that's good for us because we can get in there and see that. But there's also a backside that for probably the American citizen. So I don't know where Mark went in more detail. He didn't say US versus overseas, but if anyone could just kind of help allude or give us some context to that.
I'll start just from a little bit of experience working at the National Security Agency. I think it's a serious concern. I think people need to be wise about how they use devices. I think most of the commercial leaders out there, and certainly the IT giants, take it very seriously, and they have, for business reasons, want to make sure that they are protecting their customers in a way that allows them to have a relative amount of privacy that they expect by using a device from Amazon or from AT&T or from whomever. That being said, where we've, at least in the time that I was there, where we saw real challenges and real vulnerabilities is where people were simply not wise. When your bank comes on and says, would you please, let's use two-factor authentication, you should say, yes, I'm willing to do that, because these are steps and measures that they're taking to reduce your exposure and reduce your risk. Do you have to be able to memorize or at least copy down an awful lot of passwords? Yes, but don't make them your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's where in the past people have really had problems, is where they simply have not had good discipline in using these devices and using the security measures that come with them in a way that will reduce your exposure and reduce your risk. So you need to be savvy about it. I mean, you need to kind of do your homework. But this is still a relatively ungoverned space, and just as the other domains ultimately had rules and regulations that help us to use those in a productive way, I think we'll get there in cyberspace. I'm more concerned right now is that we've got an awful lot of folks who are almost more distrustful of the U.S. government than they are of other threats out there, and our government's ability to try to create policy that's effective use of these capabilities, these cyber technologies, is hampered because of a distrust. We've got to get to a place, and certainly from the intelligence community, we've got to get to a place where people trust us to do what we need to do to be able to protect them, and allow us to pursue the policies and regulations that will help us to do that well, rather than worrying about whether it's the U.S. government who's trying to geolocate you right now based on what your watch says.
Hey, sir, thank you so much. You helped me because there was 3 questions about that exact question, and the questions came in some sort of, hey, what do we think about intelligence on the American people, and what do we think about that? And if I could just brief you on what you told me, I think there is a balance, and we're not there yet. And I think that's what and General Cleveland probably agrees, and Colonel Adams, we're just not there. There is a balance. There has to be a balance from your perspective. Again, CLPs are meant to bring perspective of others. You could be completely on one side saying we don't need nobody should be able to look at my phone or know where I'm at. There's the other side that says we don't want another 9/11. We don't want another domestic terror. We don't want domestic terrorism. So I've got to be able to do that. So is that sort of in that realm, sir? You'll knock out a bunch of questions from people.
No, it is. I mean, think about it. In the air domain, it was relatively ungoverned at first flight, but now you don't think twice about handing over your ID when you go through TSA to be able to get on a flight. We have regulations in place that protect the greater good, and we all get confidence knowing that we're protected by allowing those things to be in place. And so, you know what, you don't go up to a TSA counter and say, I'm not going to give you my ID in order to get on this plane because that's private. You give up a measure of that in order to utilize this technology in a way that's good and safe for society. And there's a balance to that, and we've got to achieve the same thing in cyberspace, I think.
Thanks, sir. And I just want to fire away here, gentlemen. So we're just going to fire away quickly here. COVID-19, I'm sorry, we went 40 minutes without talking about it, but can one of you answer a question came in from Olivia. Did COVID-19 affect our intelligence gathering? You know, was it satellite or human intelligence? But if so, yes. Have you seen that? And just briefly kind of give us a assessment of COVID-19, not the actual virus, but has it impacted your intelligence mission? Over.
Chris, I can take the first stab at that. And the short answer is yes. COVID-19 did have an impact on the broader community. Just as the nation was staying at home, members of the intelligence community were staying at home as well. And so what it did impact is the ability to really continue along some of the lines that we discussed earlier to make sure that we are developing and future capabilities and all that. I think what was, absolutely priority for everybody was continuing to ensure really the larger mission we have, which is in some ways indications and warnings of any significant threats, supporting and providing direct support to our American troops and our allied troops who are out in the field in harm's way. Those really did not suffer. Those weren't challenged at all. But some of the deeper things that you have to do did take some time. But what COVID-19 has also provided in many ways is opportunity to reimagine and relook at the way we do business. And so in our agency, for example, we went overnight from a function of about 300 members of our 15,000 agency, 15,000 person agency, about 300 of them being able to do at-home work to really all 15, 20,000 being able to do some level of at-home work. And of course, you can't do everything. At the end of the day, this is the intelligence community, and there are things that do need to be done within secure spaces. But we have been able to explore an awful lot of ways to again, in some ways, reinvent how we approach some of these things. And in many of those cases, using a lot more commercial capability. And in my case, commercial imagery, commercial services, being able to do a number of those things at home. So short answer is it did have an impact. It did not threaten or challenge any of the really core key functions that are expected on a day-to-day basis. But in many ways, we have tried to use this as an opportunity to come back, reimagine how we do business, and frankly, be a bit stronger with it and a bit more creative with it.
Yeah, and I'll just follow that a little bit. Was having a conversation here this morning about how collaborative technology has really skyrocketed, certainly even across the military and across the intelligence community. So I mean, even Colonel Manganaro talked about us doing this call over Zoom, but it has forced us to use some collaborative technology. So the Army particularly uses MS Teams as a technology for collaboration, and many of these things were the ideas of collaboration over VTC or collaboration over portals may have been exclusive to when we were in deployed environments, but it has brought it into the day-to-day basis much more really in the last 12 months than any time else during my short career here in the Army.
Thanks, Nate. And we know that this is like the TSA, the 9/11 has caused us from just walking on airplanes to changing the way we do things. We will change the way we do things. Intelligence, logistics, education. It's going to be changes what we're going to do to that. Gentlemen, I do want to get to the last two slides. Everyone, please stay on. We got about 3 minutes. Please stay on for the last two things we have to talk about. But thank you so much for the questions that you brought in. A lot more than we expected on that. So I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all. But hey, great. Thank you so much for them. I think in buckets, we answered the big buckets of questions in there. So thank you so much. I do want to remind everybody we have 2 more webinars similar to this. So if you enjoyed it, share the word, get it out to your friends, family, parents, grandma, grandpa, cousins. We don't know. We don't care. 2 more. The next one coming up on March 15th, 2 Vietnam veterans, which in that generation, ladies and gentlemen, we don't know how much longer they're going to be here. Bud Alley, class of 64, and Colonel DeVos was a faculty here in the 70s, both Vietnam veterans. Great stories about leadership That can apply to anything. And then the final one we have, if you got to be that senior class of 2021 and you need that final CLP, Army RTC is here to help you. And so you got one more out there, and that's going to be Lieutenant General Pasquaretta, 3-star general, and Colonel Rob Marshall, full colonel, both giving you expectations for your first job. It could be a summer internship for those that are maybe freshmen and sophomore. But again, for my seniors, I'm here to help you guys. We're going to get through this. You need that one more CLP. And last thing here, I'll turn over to General Ballard briefly here, but this is how you're going to get connected. We're going to get these slides out to you so you have them, but we've got many ways to get connected with the Furman Military Alumni Association, which General Ballard's going to briefly talk about. And of course, please follow us on social media. You can see what the crazy stuff we do here and all the things that the kids are doing. So General Ballard, to you for about a minute, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And thanks also to General Cleveland and to Lieutenant Colonel Adams. What a great, fun hour this has been. You know, what I think all of us have shared when we've talked to each other is that for a small school, Furman has a pretty rich history of military service and military connections. As we've kind of gone through, and Leo can attest to this, we would go through some of the records of the alumni. We think we've got well over 1,200 Furman and alum who have some kind of military connection. A lot of those folks wanted to remain connected even after they left the campus here in Greenville. And so together we've built, and Colonel Manganero has been really the heartbeat of this for the last year of getting the Furman Military Alumni Association stood up. We've had several folks who have already contributed. We have a fund associated with the association that will provide an annual a monetary sum to the senior professor of military science at Furman to be able to conduct training and do things, leader development, staff rides, the types of things that we in the military enjoyed and look back and thought of as great learning experiences. We want to be able to do that for the cadets that are coming along at Furman now. There's nearly 100 of them in this group, which is remarkable. And we'd like to be able to give them the same leadership and training opportunities that the cadets at the military academies get. And so we think this is a good deal. If you at all are interested in what we're doing with the Furman Military Alumni Association, please link on there and let us reach back out to you. There's opportunities there to be able to provide your background, your mentorship, and even if you want to be able to give a monetary amount to the fund, we would be grateful for that as well. And I just asked Chris in a minute just to kind of say what that kind of funding and what that kind of support means to you at the department. Yeah,
so ladies and gentlemen, what we're doing here is two parts. We have the training and we have the leadership. From the training aspects, we have a range we've built downstairs, indoor range where we can train our cadets on their weapon systems without going and using ammunition and training and stuff like that, as well as for the students, in the back of the pack, we have our Rogue CrossFit upgraded fitness facility, which for me to you is a Division I athletic program level of fitness facility. And we continue to upgrade the equipment there for their fitness tests. So those are two big areas. Again, you can send us an email. We're at time right now, but you can send us an email, fmaa@furman.edu. Get on social media, see what we're doing. And yes, please partner with us, and we'll definitely continue to produce great officers like the three gentlemen that were able to be here today. So thank you so much all for being there. General Ballard, General Cleveland, Colonel Adams, thank you so much for your help. And again, have a wonderful day. And thanks so much for being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. This was great.